we started this exploration of how humans live in animals in ways that are not expected, not planned. And it really crystallized in this exhibition. It really became Three-Tired Tigers when we took into account the context of Dubai, it's the city, its streets, and even here at the Jameel Arts Centre, where you have many street cats and stray cats. Three-Tired Tigers is a group exhibition. It's actually a fairly large exhibition because we have over 40 artists and collectives from, I think, as many as 25 countries.
Since I was a child, I've been obsessed with animals. Somehow, looking at people that look at animals or perform a certain kind of behavior towards animals has always fascinated me. When you see a person looking at an animal, a mask falls off, or there's a crack in the facade where some kind of psychological issues become more apparent, or other eccentricities or desires of intimacy and projection, and I think that's quite interesting. I'm always attracted to stories of metamorphosis and transformation. Maybe you know, but like a premature locust is called a nymph, but she transforms into something else later on. They always end up in weird romantic situations, which is the same case over here. You see this nymph on the mural transforming into something big, overpowering, something that puts a lot of weight on an imperialist structure. And that's basically what we've depicted over here. What we try to do here is investigate a story that is dealing with the Imperial Bureau of Entomology. This was an organization founded by the English. They would try and investigate where sedentary, solitary, hopping grasshoppers would transform because of warm climate, because of a lot of water, a lot of food. They transform into a swarming, gregarious, flying animal that we all know from the plagues in the Bible up until the plagues that have happened relatively recently in 2020. It's quite special to be part of an exhibition like this where animals are they're not a theme, they're not a subject, they're part of our everyday life. You can't have an opinion about an animal, it's a very broad set of references, of cultural interpretations. I like the amount of freedom. For example, if you look at the work of Walid Siti, it's exceptional that he's depicting an animal, but the animal seems to be the glue that binds everything together. It's not a victim, it's unaware of its own existence perhaps, but therefore very touching, very endearing. And just looking at the presence of an animal shows the context. It makes you aware of your context.
My works always inform my heritage, my culture, and political, which have been in a constant upheaval, wars, violence, and transformation. So I had a chance to visit Iraq and Kurdish area, Kurdistan, in 1992, first time. So I went to visit this mountain, highest mountain in the region called Gara Mountain, where Saddam had a project in end of his control in the area in 88, before invading Kuwait. A big project to build 40 palaces around this big mountain. So I had a chance to visit where the palaces that were still intact. It was the beginning of him losing the control of the area. In 2018, I had the chance again to visit the place to do a video about the architecture aspect of power and the relation between architecture and power. To my surprise, there was this bear trapped there by a few barrels, and it was at the mercy of the people who are guarding this palace. I found out that a few months earlier, in late spring, they've released this bear ceremoniously. So they brought these three birds who they were in captivity for a long time as a souvenir with some people, local people, to sort of share the freedom with them, to free them in this habitat, which is in reality is a natural habitat for bear to live. But the condition before was different when nobody was living there. Now these palaces, these roads, and a lot of mines surrounding. So it is sort of naive gesture, though noble, very naive, to free these three birds who been in captivity, facing new life in this kind of uninhabitable environment for them. But I learned sadly later that all three of them disappeared, whether from natural causes or I think even I heard maybe they were killed, unfortunately. So I felt this kind of resonate with the idea of how we as a human and an animal who are under our brutality, and we are under brutality of other power or policymaker, or we are kind of our human condition and animal condition somehow meet somehow. And I see it as a kind of synonym what we went through and what they going through. So kind of epitomize the kind of cycle of violence and upheaval witnessed by the people from very old time until now. So I brought the idea as well, the text from Gilgamesh I borrowed to express this idea of cycles.
I wasn't planning on making work about animals, but I think there's that quote that I included in my work by John Berger, where it says, "At street level, outside a vehicle, every modern city is violent and tragic." And I was at street level because I had undergone a surgical procedure, and I was prescribed walking as part of my physical rehabilitation process. And it was, I think, going through that walking process around my neighborhood that I think opened up these observations that then came to fruition as this work. There's a very specific moment, I think, on one of those walks that was sort of the genesis of this whole project, because up until that point, I was taking note of these cats and seeing how they kind of congregate around these dumpsters, and it's almost like this place of refuge and this place of sanctuary, and you see cats get run over one day and then other cats pop up and spawn out of these dumpsters. It's like they're birthing or breeding grounds. But there was a very specific moment on one of my walks where I just saw this kind of old, rather bony and rugged looking cat, mother cat, rummaging through some trash. And that's not an odd sight. I'd seen that before, but what was peculiar about that is that she picked up a piece of paper from these garbage bags and started walking with it, like dangling from her mouth. And I thought that was odd. And it walked towards a dumpster and placed this paper at its base. And then 3 of its little kittens or its children came out from underneath the dumpster and started licking this paper. And that's when I'd realized that it was a piece of packaging paper, like the kind that you would buy meat in. And what they were licking was the residual blood and fat that had dried up on this paper. And this cat just stood there looking at its children, and it almost looked to me as if she was disappointed or ashamed or upset that all it could find or all it could scavenge that day was not really a meal, but this unfulfilled promise of what a meal could be. And that moment was quite gripping for me. It broke this barrier between species, between being able to relate to species. And it made me think of sacrifice and hunger and void and loss, and how, people experience that on a daily basis. So that became a window of using animal behavior to, I think, cross this bridge between also human behavior or human lived experience. I think the space or the theme itself regarding animals as sentient beings can be quite a useful space to, and maybe even question that. A culture of hyper-consumerism and car dependency, animals can almost be reduced to background objects or side characters. And I think that it's good to challenge that.
Especially when it comes to questions of, how to work with animals, ethical treatments of animals and so on. You have artists that come from very, very different backgrounds and positions with that. And it's not my role to reconcile them. It's precisely my role to offer a bit of this complexity, a bit of this tension for visitors to look at different points of view and then see what they resonate with, what challenges them, what prompts them to think differently. For me, are not resolved, are not closed. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what my definitive opinion is. But I love works like this that are so rich that they open you to this complexity and leave you wondering, what would you do? What would you think? How would you act?